Hey, good morning, options traders. And last week I posted a video talking about some traders on YouTube who were posting videos about GAN fans and saying that they were 92% accurate or that they had a 92% win rate. And I was showing in that video why that simply cannot be true. And it's one of the few videos where I actually got some thumbs down on it. And I can't help but think that it's some hardcore GAN fans who are saying, oh no, this is sacred territory. Don't bash GAN. You can definitely get some great insights by analyzing angles. So as a follow-up, I received an email from one of the traders, and GAN aside, he said that he uses angles on his charts to try to figure out if a stock is rising too fast or too slow, and was asking for comments about that. So we had this long conversation back and forth with the emails, and I thought maybe it could help some of you out there who are prone to using angles on your charts. Now, normally when I do videos, I like to channel people into what to do. I think that's more efficient than saying here's one of many paths to not take. But this is a little bit of an exception because there are a lot of people who like to analyze stock chart angles. So what are some of the problems with analyzing stock chart angles? Well, let's go find out more. As always, before we do, please be sure to click like and subscribe. It's greatly appreciated and definitely helps to promote the channel. So let's knock out a couple of definitions up front where I think is also a big source of the confusion. Slope versus angle. Now, a lot of times we use these interchangeably, and sometimes in the videos I do too, just because I think it makes it easier to get the concepts across. But traders confuse slope and angle. Now, when we talk about slope, it's the classic rise over run definition. How high did something go up? Let's say the stock price relative to how many dollars did the stock move? Let's say if we're looking at a risk graph. And that would be our delta. Just rise over run. That's the slope of a chart. But the angle is really linked to circles in rotation. We know that a circle is divided up into 360 degrees, and we can measure how far, let's say that we're walking along a circle, and we can measure these angles between some lines. So for example, here's a circle, and let's say we start out here facing, let's say, to the east, which, by the way, if you've taken basic math, you'll know that when they look at quadrants, they usually go 1, 2, 3, 4 in counterclockwise direction. And when they start with angles, they usually start over here kind of facing east. And the reason is that that's where a lot of this came from. This whole idea with the angles and the cosines and tangents and all the trig functions that you probably remember, because they were looking at, let's say, the sun rising in the east and watching it rise and then kind of circle this way. So that's where that direction came from. We usually start here, but let's say that we come up to this kind of a slope right here. So we know that a 90 degree would be straight up, right? If we go straight over this way, this black line is 180 degrees. If we come all the way down here, that's 270, and then a full circle would be 360. So this is just half of a 90, which would therefore be 45 degrees. So if we drop a line straight down from there, it turns out that this distance will be exactly equal to this distance. So this might be 1 mile, then that means that you are 1 mile over. Or if it's 1 inch on the graph, this is 1 inch over. 1 meter, whatever units you're in, they are going to be the same if you have a 45-degree line. Now this might seem like we're getting fairly technical here, and that's also where the problem lies, as you will soon see. So another way to visualize a 45-degree line, once you understand that we have to have an equal, let's say, a horizontal distance and an equal vertical distance, is to just look at a square. We know that a square has the same measurement on each side, so let's make them 1 unit. And if we connect this diagonal right there, we know that that has to be a 45-degree line. Why? Because we have 1 unit high and 1 unit wide. But here's another key. Notice that these are in the same units. Remember, if this is 1 meter, this is 1 meter. If this is 10 feet, this is 10 feet. But when we do that, we get a 45-degree line. That is true, but our slope is 1. Remember, it's rise. how high did it rise, divided by the run. How far did we run along this horizontal axis here? And that's also the delta. So if we take 1 divided by 1, we get 1. So typically we say if you own 1 share of stock, you have a delta of 1. That means that it's rising $1, your stock position, for every dollar that the stock rises. Well, that makes sense because you're measuring dollars against dollars. And in that case, yes, it is a 45-degree line. But now, here's where things start to get really tricky. Let's say that we're looking at a risk graph, the profit and loss diagrams that I show in virtually every video, and we purchase shares of stock here at 100. So for every dollar that it goes up, we know that we rise $1. For every dollar that it falls, we lose $1. That's what it means to be delta 1. And because it's a straight line, that never changes. So just to look at it a little bit easier, let's say that we go 15 units out this way. That's our run. So we go 15 units out, and it just so happens for this share of stock that, of course, we gain $15. We can see it right there. So we know that this vertical distance is also 15. So we could look at this and say, well, we're $15 up and we're $15 across, and therefore this is a 45-degree line. And this is what traders are thinking is happening when they're analyzing angles. But take a look at this chart a little closer. Even though it's $15 up and $15 across, look at the physical size of that blue arrow compared to the red. Do you see how it's nowhere near as long as the red? Well, that tells you that this can't be a 45-degree line. What we've done is kind of backed into it by saying, well, if this were exactly 15 units high and this were exactly 15 units wide, then yes, this would be a 45-degree line. But because of the way that most computer screens are laid out and the way that I have my graph, this becomes an aspect ratio problem. The graph is wider than it is tall, and so that starts to distort things. So we can see it if we were to overlay our perfect square on this, and we know to connect the corners right here, there is a 45-degree line, and you can see it's not even close to the black line. And even though, again, traders will look at this and say, well, wait a minute, it's 15 units high, 15 units wide, therefore it's a 45-degree line. Well, not if you've got a different aspect ratio. And so this completely throws things. So if you think that you're going to look at an angle and compare it to another stock at maybe the same point in time and look at that angle, and then come back a week later and compare angles, the aspect ratios are going to change. That's just one of several problems. So another problem that we run into with our stock charts is that we really have different units. On the profit and loss diagram that we just saw, we don't. We've got dollars versus dollars. But on a stock chart, even if we have a perfectly squared chart, and I'll show you how you can do that in a moment, you have 1 unit of, let's say, time, maybe 1 day, compared to 1 unit of price, let's say in dollars. But does it make sense to compare time to price? How big is 1 unit of time compared to $1? What does it mean to compare time to price? So you can't compare different units. Now there are exceptions. Let's say if you had distance and time, because that's a physical relationship. That's from physics. It's just, we could relate that to speed, and that would make sense. But how do you relate time to price? But again, this is where all of the GAN people or people who analyze angles say it doesn't matter, because they might look and say, well, this was measured over 30 days, and the stock went up $30. So I have 30 units up vertically here, and I have 30 units across, so therefore this must be a 45-degree line. Well, wait a minute. What if you chose, instead of 30 days, or even just calling it 30 days, you could still use the same time period right here, but what if you called it 1 month? Now what's your delta, or the slope? Now it's 30 over 1, which is going to be more like an 88-degree angle. And then some people might say, well, wait a minute, it's still the same amount of time no matter what you call it. All right, well, let's call it 1 year. Is it now fair to say that it's 30 over 1? Well, no, because 1 month is now down here somewhere. See, it becomes arbitrary. That's the whole point, is that you can make this angle anything that you want just by changing the scale on your graph. And people don't think about that, so they just go and compare it today, and then they come back a week later or a month later and they say, oh, let's compare these angles and see if it's increased or decreased. And you're not comparing apples to apples. And when that happens, you're absolutely going to be led down the wrong path. You're going to think that you're looking at good information, and it's completely arbitrary. So let's go over to the tastytrade platform and see some of these problems that can occur. On a live chart, I'll show you how to square it up and why that still isn't even going to help. Okay, so now we're into the tastytrade platform, and I'm just going to use QQQ, but take your pick, whatever stock you want to look at and whatever time period. I can analyze this period right here where it's in an uptrend. I could do the same thing down here. We could look at what's called the angle of elevation or the angle of depression. Same problem. But on this platform, let's just take a look at this. I can do what's called an info line. And let's say I want to connect the bottom of this green candle here at this low to the close here on Friday. So I'm going to click there, and then I'm going to click here, and it's telling me that that is a 38-degree angle. And people will use this to say, well, I can now make comparisons in the future. Now, by the way, this is in no way a knock against tastytrade. Most of your brokers' platforms will do this. Why? Because traders insist on it. And then a lot of them will say, well, if you don't have it on your platform, I'm going to go somewhere else. So the brokers are kind of forced to say, hey, if you want to know the angle, we'll show it to you. It doesn't necessarily mean they're saying it's a good idea. It's just what a lot of traders want, and I'm trying to show you why it's a bad idea to use it. So here's one problem, is that remember we have to have a unit right here, or a measurement going across the horizontal. Well, they're telling you right here it's 42 bars. Perfect, 42 trading days. But wait a minute, in parentheses they're saying it's 60 days. So is this really 60 wide, or is it 42 wide? Take your pick, and you're going to get different answers as to what that angle actually is. Now see, I can also change the aspect ratio. It's a 38-degree angle based on these distances, but it's not square. So watch this. What if I come back a month later and I do this? Now it's telling me that's a 23-degree angle. Or I happen to be a little more zoomed in than I was last time. Now it's telling me it's 47 degrees. Or I don't have exactly these same dates and I do this. Now it's telling me it's a 66-degree angle. See, I can make it anything that I want. You know, you want to make it a hardly type of a move right there is a 10-degree angle. So the problem is it's the scale and the aspect ratios. We just don't really know what we're measuring, and it can be anything that you want. Now here's where some people say, well, hold on a second. I can square up the chart, and I can make it where one physical unit on my chart is the same horizontally or vertically. All right. Here's one way we could do it. Let's go grab our info line. And I'm just going to pick an arbitrary distance here. Let's say maybe, see if we can get a nice round number here. There's 404. Now I'm going to go click on it again. Let's see if we can get 404 vertically. Okay, so now I have 404 pixels high and 404 wide. You can make it anything you want. 300, 1,000, they just have to be the same. Now to speed it up, I'm going to take a price line. I'm going to connect it right there to the top. I'm doing this just to get the horizontal bar. I'm going to use a timeline, connect it here. Now I have a perfect square. This is what we saw in the presentation. Now watch what happens if I grab my info line. If I connect these two, we should get a 45-degree line. And when I connect them, and there it is, 45-degree line. So now I have a perfectly squared chart, at least in terms of pixels. But now what I'm saying is that 1 day equals $1. And if that makes sense to you, by all means go ahead and use it. But I can tell you it's going to lead to bad decisions because they are completely arbitrary. Because again, here we've got a perfect square. If I change the scale, see, there's an aspect ratio problem. It's still the 404 wide and 404 high, but I've just changed the scale over here. And so now it's telling me that it's a 28-degree angle. So I can bring it back up here, and let's put it back to 45. So the point is that if you are one of these people who are dragging lines across your chart, measuring the angle, and trying to say that, like according to Gann, that a 45-degree line is kind of the mark it's in harmony and everything is perfect, and if it's above that, it's rising too quickly, if it's below that, it's too slow, whatever. Whatever you're using, you're not measuring it correctly. Because if you're looking at time on the horizontal and price on the vertical, you're looking at two different units that cannot be mixed. So out of all the types of technical analysis, I definitely do not like the picture versions, the head and shoulders, the flags, pennants, and stuff like that. But above all of them, the one that I like the least, the one that is just a really bad idea, whoever came up with it, is to use angles to make decisions for your trading. And for anyone who'd like to learn more about the art and science of options trading, please check out the Alpha Trader course, Strategy Lab, and a candlesticks and technical analysis course. It's all at optionsatoz.com. Also, please join us on Options A to Z's Facebook trading group, and you can find a link in the description below.